Gracious and loving God, thank you for the opportunity to be in your word. We pray that this time is helpful, of course. We pray that it will be a gift to us. We pray that it will challenge and uplift us and connect us, that it'll let your word, give your word a chance to work in our lives. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Give us a good workout of those faith muscles. All right, well, let's see here. So let me get this shared here and we'll get, all right, we're at chapter 32, I believe. And we've got a little practical issue, which is kind of interesting. We'll see how we can apply this to our lives. I bet you we can. So this is chapter 32. Reuben and Gad settle in Gilead. Now, suppose you want to know where Gilead is. Let's see if I didn't pull up my map ahead of time. Sometimes it takes a while to load up. But Gilead is Jordan. It's on the east side of the Jordan River, because technically the people are still, they're still on this side of the Jordan River. Here we go. So, and this will be, let's see, where's my little graph? Oh yeah, here we go. So I can click on this, I think. So the green here, tribe of Gad. The purple is tribe of Manasseh. And then the little orange guy, I don't know which one that is, Western inheritance of the tribe of Manasseh. So we're going to hear about these two tribes here, the purple and then the green and the orange. Let's see if I can just get a little bigger. There we go. Oh, that's too big, but there we go. So in essence, this is where they're at, and they're talking about going in and getting the land that God had promised them. But this is going to be the question. These two tribes say, wow, the Golan Heights, as we like to call it today, is up here. In this area, but this is great, especially back 2,000 years ago, was great pasture land. I don't know about if that's true today, but it was great pasture land. So this is going to set up an issue. There's a couple tribes that say, hey, we'd like to stay here. We don't want to go over here. We like to stay here. Now, this, of course, makes Moses, he flashes back to when God was going to give him the land. And I imagine at this point, he's like, man, wouldn't it have been great if everybody would have just gotten on board with Caleb and Joshua? We'd have spared ourselves 40 years of struggle. But so now he's, of course, going to quickly think that they just don't want to go into the land, that they're getting a repeat of the, sin and the distrust that the people had back at the beginning of Numbers. But so let's see how this all transpires. Now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad had a very great number of livestock, and they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben came and said to Moses and to Eleazar, the priest, and to the chiefs of the congregation, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eleah, Sebam, Nebo, Beon. The land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock. Remember, they had conquered that land. We had heard that back from, I guess, the Midianites, right? And your servants have livestock. So it's like, we conquered this land, your servants have lots of livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, Let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan." But Moses said to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, "Shall your brothers go to war while you sit here? Why will you discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going over into the land that the Lord has given them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land that the Lord had given them." It's interesting the way this is phrased. Let's come back to that verse 9 if I forget. "And the Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, Surely none of the men who came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me. None except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for years." I think we know the story, Moses. "Until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And behold, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all this people." So what is being proposed, Moses sees as a threat to the whole venture, not just to those particular two tribes, which is interesting. "Then they came near to him and said, We will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones, but we will take up arms, ready to go before the people of Israel, until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones shall live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will, we will not return to our homes until each of the people of Israel has gained his inheritance. For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan, to the east." So Moses said to them, "If you will do this, if you will take up arms and to go before the Lord for the war, and every armed man of you will pass over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies and before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then after you shall return and be free from obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you do not do so, behold, you will have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out." That's an interesting phrase too. Very interesting. "Build cities for your little ones, and folds for your sheep, and do what you have promised." And the people of Gad and the people of Reuben said to Moses, "Your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our little ones, our wives, our livestock, and all our cattle." Excuse me, I guess I didn't sleep well last night. "And all our cattle shall remain there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will pass over, every man who is armed for war, before the Lord to battle, as my Lord orders." So Moses gave command concerning them to Eleazar the priest, and to Joshua the son of Nun, and to the heads of the fathers' houses and tribes of the people of Israel. And Moses said to them, "If the people of Gad and the people of Reuben," you get the sense that in Hebrew they had a lovely way of repeating themselves. Some people see this as different traditions being brought in, but this is also very typical of oral cultures where you have to repeat things a lot just to keep the communication going. So this isn't an uncommon kind of rhetorical or literary process or device, I guess you could say. And you shall give them the land of Gilead for possession. However, if they will not pass over with you armed, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. They, if they will not pass over with you armed, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. So if they don't go over, they don't get to stay, but they also get place in Canaan. That's kind of interesting. People of Gad and the people of Reuben answered, what the Lord has said to your servants, we will do. We will pass over armed before the Lord into the land of Canaan, and the possession of our inheritance shall remain with us beyond the Jordan. And Moses gave to them, to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, to half tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and king of Og, king of Bashan, the land and its cities with their territories, the cities of the land throughout the country. And the people of Gad built Dibon, Ataroth, Aror, Ataroth, Sophon, Jazer, Jobeh, whatever, these cities, fortified cities and folds for sheep. And the people of Reuben built Heshbon. And so they built all those wonderful cities. And they gave other names to the cities that they built. And the sons of Machir and the son of Manasseh went to Gilead and captured it and dispossessed the Amorites who were in it. And Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he settled in it. And Jair, the son of Manasseh, went and captured their villages and called them Havoth Jair, which evidently means villages of Jair. And Nobah went and captured Kenath and its villages and called it Nabah after his own name. All right, so just fascinating, riveting stuff, huh?
Well,
interesting.
Pastor, I'm wondering, when we went to Israel, we also went to Jordan. Which areas did we cross over? I mean, when we were driving down that whole east side of the Jordan River, did we go through this?
Yeah, so we did not, well, we did not go over here, which is like the Golan Heights area. We came down and we came over here and crossed. I'm not so sure that we did not, when we went to Jordan, because I'm pretty sure that we came all the way down and entered Jordan down here, south of the Dead Sea. I'm pretty sure. I think
we had an extremely long drive, so I
wait
just
a minute.
assumed.
No. It was over here. Yeah. So yeah. I just can't. We did cross. That's right. We did cross
we were north
up here.
Of Jerusalem,
yeah. We crossed up north of the Dead Sea, right down here, and then we went way down here to. So yeah, not Saudi Arabia. I was a little messed up in my thinking here. So yeah, so we went down here into Jordan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and we stood where Moses first saw the promised land, but then we went north of that to get back to Jerusalem.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I can't remember where that mount. Well, what mount is that he looked over into the promised land? I forget, but I think it's in here somewhere. So yeah. So that's this is the land over here they're talking about. And it's interesting. Tribe of, where's the tribe? Oh, okay, this is the orange. Okay, so this would be the Reuben part. This would be Manasseh and, or no, tribe of Gad, I guess. This would be Gad. And then up here, the purple would be Manasseh. So those three different groups. settle over here, which evidently wasn't necessarily part of the original deal, this is the part that I find kind of interesting to all this. But yeah. So what else jumps out at you in this chapter? Nothing.
Well, they did record it so that nobody would have a fight about, well, I thought I heard him say, well, I thought I heard him saying, no, we really wanted that. So it's recorded so that, as all our legal documents know, when we're looking for what's our inheritance, it has to be recorded.
Yeah. I wonder if this chapter doesn't become, now that I think about it, an issue with some of the more Zionist kind of folks who, because this, but of course this is Jordan. This isn't even occupied, this isn't even Palestinian, supposedly, the Palestinian area.
Quick question here. Was this recorded before or after they already entered in the promised land? Saying this is what it's going to be, or this is what happened already?
Well, my own conviction is that this is recorded at the time, I guess I'm a little bit in a minority. I think that the Hebrew people were writing stuff down at this point already, in my humble opinion, but it wasn't, we don't have the actual writings because nothing would survive that long. The only thing we have is stuff that's written on stone or this type of thing. And we do have a few things that date back this far, but I think so whether it was recorded in an oral fashion or a written fashion or in this particular fashion, I wouldn't say. I certainly am open to, the tweaking of the sources here and this getting composed later. But of course, the old tradition is that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, so he would have written this at the same time. But I mean, most critical scholars today would feel like this would get written down later. But whether it was written or recorded in the minds orally of the people or however they did that, they made a big point of, when you hear all these names and all of these, that sounds to me like a, kind of a written contract almost type of thing. So
before the congregation of Israel.
Yeah.
Pastor,
Yes.
I'm surprised that Moses, that he took upon himself to grant them this permission with all the stipulation, that he didn't go and said, let me talk this over with God, because God had promised the people that he would take them to the promised land. And now Moses is letting them with this stipulation not cross over. And I think too that after they knew what happened to the people of Canaan or wherever it was now, that they were probably too scared to go back on their word.
You would think they would be, for sure. And yeah, this is an interesting kind of compromise, isn't it? And Moses goes along with it. And yeah, he acts on behalf of God here. Yeah.
Yeah, they kept their word though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out, Audrey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know what might have happened to them in the future?
Do we know what might have happened to them in the future?
Yeah, like for example, I was thinking of kind of the same thing, that it reminded me of when Abraham and Sarah took matters in their own hands with Hagar. This was kind of like a group that took matters into their own hands, and so I just wondered if something happens to them in the future.
I have a note on that, if I could share.
Please.
It says Moses solemnly granted their request. At the request, these tribes, at the conquest, These tribes did as they had promised and received the land. However, they paid a heavy price for their eagerness to settle for what they could see rather than wait for the promise of faith. The tribes were plagued by half-heartedness. Their desire for immediate satisfaction threatened the unity of the nation, and their lands were among the first to fall to enemy attack in later generations. Faithful people do not settle for what they can see or what they can see. Where are you settling for less than God's best? What compromise is endangering your future or the future of your family or your church?
Interesting.
Yeah, and Pastor Bill, did it said if you don't settle in those lands, in the east there, east of the Jordan, you'll still be you will have land in the, so they weren't penalized in any way. You'll still have land there, but you've got to make your decision. If you come with us. And they said no and refused, as if they'd be better. And I'm surprised that Moses let them, because God is saying, well, I've got that land in there for these tribes as well, and they're not going in.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? You know, the Bible Study Fellowship note that Gloria read, sees this as, well, it was a compromise, but it wasn't, a good thing.
No.
And I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The mention of the half-tribe comes as a surprise, since they have not been mentioned before in the narrative. That's interesting. Their addition may become a product of some later editing of the story. The other half. So the other half settles inside. Let's see what this commentary has to say in that. The story forms a literary bridge from the new generation of Israelites back to the central theme of the book as defined by the spy story of 13 and 14. The death of the old wilderness generation and the birth of the new generation of hope on the edge of the promised land. Moses focuses both the promises and the warning of the tradition of the old generation upon the experience of the new generation of God's people. The final fate of the second generation remains unknown at this point. Everything has proceeded well up to this point, just as it had for the old generation through the first 10 chapters of Numbers. But the successful resolution of the potential crisis brings the narrative to a conclusion on a positive and hopeful note. The new generation continues to be characterized as faithful, but also creative adherence to God and the traditions of the past. The give and take of compromise and negotiation in a spirit of genuine reverence for the Mosaic traditions of the past allow the new generation to move forward in its journey towards the promised land. Oh, that's interesting. So this is good. So we get a couple different takes on this, on this compromise, on this event. So I love that. I love, Gloria, that you read yours, and I love contrasting it with the one of the commentaries that doesn't necessarily see it as a negative thing, because it's interesting. Moses doesn't say, "Okay, I'm going to do this, but you're really blowing it. This isn't going to go well, etc." He goes along with it. He says, "Well, as long as you go in and fight, we'll work with you." So, but again, that's open for our wrestling and interpretation. So this is good.
It's interesting to go back to the end of Genesis to the blessing of all of Jacob's sons and see what he says about each one of these. So
Yeah.
Reuben and Gad, that's in Genesis 49. And I think that gets back to what Ethel May was saying about, you know, keeping track of history. And you just see continuity when you look at, you know, when you look at things like this, you really see the continuity and why they find it so important to keep track of all these names.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the individuals, that their tribe kind of takes on the personality of the individual.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that one was Reuben, and then Gad is in verse 19.
Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Interesting.
So that was kind of what Gloria was saying about the future of these two tribes.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was interesting that he kind of tacked on Manasseh at the end, because Manasseh hadn't asked, but Ephraim and Manasseh were from Joseph, and so Joshua was from Ephraim. He was the one that went over, and then Manasseh stayed there.
Interesting.
And so what he says about Joseph in verse 22, he's really saying about Joshua.
Joseph is a fruitful bow by a spring. His branches shall run over the wall. That's great.
The archers attacked him. You know, it kind of goes on. That really talks about,
talks about the Battle of Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
And so much is said about him too. Look at this. Wow.
Something else about wanting to stay in that, on the grazing lands to the east, it looks as though there's a separation geographically from going with the rest of the group, who is going to go over on the other side between the Mediterranean and the what is that, the Sea of Galilee, or the
sure Sea of Jordan River and Sea of Galilee. Yeah.
So they're going to be in a more kind of a more protected area, and the people to the east are going to be wide open to, like they say, the raiders who can come in from the farther east areas or up from the south or whatever. So they have to build cities and fortified cities.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else is going to go over and they'll find fortified cities too, but they're already built.
Yeah. And this is going to be the King's Highway, comes down through here and then over here and then down. So, you know, this northern area and the northeast here was when the Assyrians conquered, of course, the whole north fell, you know, all the way here. But these folks, I think they were less protected. I think that would be safe to say, geographically as well as otherwise. Yeah.
Instead of the Wild West, it's the Wild East.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by the Bible Study Fellowship comment, you know, because it is a good application. Like, how do we look at, you know, on a certain level, I totally, you know, we are faced with, well, don't compromise, you know, don't settle, don't look at, you know, Paul says we don't look at what can be seen, we look at what can be unseen, you know, and you know, and I'm totally with that. I think that's totally there. But I also sometimes think that, you know, God works with our human frailty. You know, God has a plan and we have a plan, but sometimes we don't want to do God's plan, and sometimes God doesn't want our plan to be the prevailing thing. But you know, maybe when you get the two of us together, you know, you get the two forces together, you've really got something. And I don't know, maybe maybe that says God will kind of work with us, even though I think it probably would have been better for these tribes to have gone over to, on the other side of the Jordan in the long run. I think that's safe to say too. Yeah. Interesting.
I think it's like what Stephen Paulson was saying about the promise being hidden and unhidden, promise made and hidden. And, if they would have just stuck with the plan, the promise would have had no problem. But the promise is always there regardless of what these people do. They just, God is faithful and keeps, revealing the promise, and we keep messing it up, but the promise is always there.
Yeah. And this tribe did go in, they did go to war. They didn't, do the exact same problem. Yes, sorry, heard somebody coming in there.
It's me, Bruce. I've been here for a while, but I was muted. I was just thinking about all these things about God's best will for us gives our best results. But God is in relationship with us. We're not his puppets, so he's willing to work with us in terms of relationship. But if you take God at his word and do exactly what he's made clear to you that he wants you to do, you're going to get his best. But we're in relationship with God, and so he'll work with us. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of what I'm wrestling with, is that God worked with the people. There were limits, and Moses, of course, I love that too, that he didn't go and consult God. Maybe God would have told Moses, forget it, but
I noticed on the map that northern part of Manasseh that stayed out, the purple, that Ashtaroth, wasn't that mentioned a lot in the time when there was all the idolatry and all that sort of stuff? So I think that by not going in, they were sort of out on the fringes and more likely just to drift away, and all these other influences would come in because they didn't stay close to what God's best was for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there you go. That's let me see something here. I want. Capital city of Og, king of Bashan, whom the Israelites under Moses defeated in battle. It's later mentioned as a city of refuge, given the Gershonites, a Levitical group. It was located to the east of Siagai because the name is the plural form of the Hebrew Ashtaroth, Canaanite goddess of fertility. It is probable that the city was once a special place of her worship. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so, they had the same trouble that the rest of the people had, but magnified because of them staying there. That's helpful, Kathy. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. I think that's an interesting application. I guess we could take both sides of this and say, stick with God's plan as best you know it, but at the same time also know that God works with us. I've talked to so many people who have felt like they made a wrong turn and it's just like over, And I just say, God, God can get you back on track, and so maybe you didn't become this, but you've been this, and look at the blessings that have done, So there is, Anyway,
I like to put it, lucky for us, God is into redemption,
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And from our side, maybe it would have been better, you know, that they didn't do this compromise, but from our side, it's like, well, thank goodness God works with us. Even, you know, he doesn't abandon us when the promise is threatened. He'll repost the promise. Yeah.
And God knew that they were going to choose that way from the beginning anyway. You know, he had to have known, even though he gave them the opportunity.
True.
Yeah.
God does know.
Yeah.
Beyond our knowing how God can know and all of that. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in Psalm 22, it says, great bulls of Bashan have beset me round. It's almost like and at that time, when Jesus was on the cross, the elite Roman soldiers were actually in that area because one of the Caesar sons, you know, was the king of that area at that time. And they had come down with the
Yeah.
who was it? The Roman.
Yeah, I'm not remembering the general's name now.
Yeah, but it
Leighton.
all links up to that. So maybe there was a bigger plan for that
Right.
area anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Because
Yep.
those Herodians were half Jewish,
Yes.
or had a link. So
Yeah. They were kind of half Jewish, you could say. Yeah. And there was a link there to they were from that area. That's true. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, so the bulls of Bashan were literally there down when Jesus was quoting Psalm 22. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, I think that's a great application. Another application is this one, where Moses says, "And be sure your sin will find you out." Ugh, boy, that's sometimes the way that works. Sometimes the way that works. What was the other thing I said I wanted to come back to? Let's see, verse. Oh, yeah. Why will you discourage the heart of the people? I think that has some legs, I guess you could say, when it comes to contemporary, not just our certain situation, but a people's heart can be discouraged by a leader, by a pastor, by a bishop, or it can be heartened by your leader. Leadership is important. We have our areas of influence. We have our families. We have the people that we mentor. There is that God can work through us to encourage or discourage the heart of those that we have influence over. So that's kind of interesting to me. The corporate sense of being discouraged or encouraged, that kind of jumped out at me and struck me. So leadership is important. So I have to be attentive to that as a pastor.
And also, it looks as though Moses was the only decision maker. It said, while they may be discouraging the heart of the people, there was not a council of representatives from every tribe that said, well, what do you think about this? It wasn't put before the rest of the group to see what they would, how they would want to work this out. It was strictly Moses.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it can be an arbitrary one-person decision that can cause groups to go ahead and separate, for instance. In other words, it's kind of complex because it's the more people or the more democratic,
Yeah.
so to speak, the decision, the better. Then people are understanding the bigger picture. And maybe that would help the people who want to separate to understand their part of it too. I don't know. There are just some things interesting here. Still, Moses is the one to have the say-so.
Yeah, was this a good thing or not a good thing? Or at least we could look at the pros and cons. You know, the pros of this is it's efficient. You know, Moses has the authority and he does it now, but I totally agree with you. Like, but it's interesting. There's just different leadership styles. When I, you know, in all my stuff preparing to be a pastor and after becoming a pastor, I do a fair amount of reading about leadership and, you know, there are different styles there. And some leaders are very much, you know, the one person says it and it's done. That's the way it works. That's the way their leadership style is. And of course, the downsides of that is that it can create resentment. You don't get consensus. Sometimes it's harder to get everybody on board, but then also different cultures are different that way. There was a great presentation at the Global Leadership Summit many years ago by a woman who studies different cultures, and her job is she coaches different companies who are working in different cultures in different countries, you know, to see the cultural differences and how they affect the business and different business teams. And she kind of ranked, she had a number of different categories for the leadership, but one of them was, you know, is it top down or is it bottom up type of thing? And I remember I went to that just before I went to Ethiopia. And I was amazed that Gemencius, and this is not a criticism, okay, so that Gemencius Buba, the Lutheran pastor, he's assistant to director of evangelism, I think, for the North American Lutheran Church here in the United States, and he's from Ethiopia, and so he has a radio, TV presence, he has lots of schools, he has a university there, and so he's very well known in Ethiopia. But boy, you know, when I sat in on his meetings, everybody came with their notebooks. He told them what to do. They prayed and worshiped for about 45 minutes before every meeting, and then he just basically told them what to do, and they just did it. It was like, wow, that's different from the United States, you know. That, I mean, you know, so Moses kind of has that presence. But, you know, Sharon, for me, I would never think of making a decision like that was a big decision for the parish without involving leaders and getting their input and getting their ownership, and, you know, and then just bouncing. I have a mutual ministry committee, I have a church council, and, you know, I get their feedback on stuff because I don't want to make a decision by myself, because usually my decisions when I've done that have been bad. So, you know, I'm with you. And maybe if Moses would have involved some other folks, it might have been a better decision, you know. I don't know.
But we are affected by our American way, which was described, what Benjamin Franklin said, here's a great experiment. Go,
yeah.
I hope we can make it work, you know. And
yeah, sure.
Because typically governments have always been top down.
Yes.
I mean, say always, but, you know, across the board, tribal chiefs and the kings and the rulers, and they would send down the orders, and that's it.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And, you know, it's interesting. Our Lutheran polity is, you know, congregation calls the pastor, then they send representatives and they call the bishop. So it's supposed to at least come from a little bit more of a team, maybe not grassroots, but from a combo. But yeah, and, you know, I think of Winston Churchill that talked about democracy and just said how horrible it is and inefficient, and,
Yeah.
ridiculous. And then he said, but it's the best thing we've found yet, you know? So yeah, each system has its pluses and minuses. I mean, if you've got a really great Moses,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. But we know Moses wasn't perfect either. So that's the problem. So the corruption of power and all that. But yeah, no, that's helpful, Sharon, because it's fun to look at this from a leadership perspective, that Moses kind of makes a unilateral decision here. So yeah.
I keep thinking through all of this, and it doesn't really follow along with the leadership part. Well, it does.
Okay.
But I just find so much the importance of community worship and community staying together. And, you know, as Christians, I think it's really important that we do Bible study together and we worship together and things like that. And these people that separated, you know, they didn't do so well. And we really need to support each other and stick together, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That's for sure. We need that. We don't want to be going it alone.
Well, we are going it kind of alone by the systems that we're under right now, not being able to come to our sanctuary. I can say I miss that terribly, to come to a sanctuary where there's order and there's liturgy, there are robes, the choir is singing, and they will wear robes too, and those things that are put in our so-called temple are very helpful, and they reinforce the things that we learn as we come and we worship together. And you know, when people dress down and all that kind of thing, that's fine up to a point, but you know, there's great value in keeping the traditions, because it does really help in the long run to give us a sense that we're coming to a holy place.
Yeah.
My computer isn't the holy place, but it's
yeah.
now.
You know, those are great. You make me think of a lot of things as you share that. Thank you, Sharon. You know, my homiletics prof, who was a Missouri Synod and then Seminex prof, I remember something he said. He said, we invest, you know, like in the altar area and in the sanctuary. You know, in one sense, those are there's nothing more special about that place than, you know, your living room. But we invest in those symbols and in the place and, you know, in all the things you mentioned. And then, you know, they pay off for us. God uses those to bless us, you know. And, you know, so this COVID thing has taken a lot of that away.
Yeah.
You know,
the things that at church that I'm mentioning are constants. And I think I've always felt awed by the fact that Jews, when they do their worship in the synagogue, or just even having a ceremony, they put on shawls.
Yeah.
And they have, what's the word I'm looking for?
It's a prayer shawl, and it's a,
they set the setting. And
the pyramids.
So that you know, this is a constant. It's been going for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value in coming to something that's a constant.
Yes, absolutely, and that's for sure. The couple of the other things you've made me think of is that we've been talking, because Bruce is going to start having, you know, regular office hours again pretty soon. And we've been thinking for people that just miss the sanctuary that, you know, publicizing times people can come just to pray, or, you know, and just be in the sanctuary. If we can't worship together because large groups are a problem, you know, that people could at least do that, you know. But I mean, I know that's not just what you were talking about, but that's something at least we could do while we, you know, look at regathering in the sanctuary here in October. Probably is what I'm shooting for.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. So, but no, we invest in a place and in things in the Bible. And yes, the computer works. The word gets preached. We hear it. And yes, you can have communion in your home. But there's still something that is powerful about that. And that's what surprised me about the Park and Praise service, that I didn't think it would have an impact on me, but it actually has. It actually works because people are together, you know. So you know, that's not an advertisement. That's just, for me, it actually was a surprise that would kind of pay off. That's not a great way to put it, but yeah. No, great comments, very helpful. Please, Kim.
I read a
shoot.
evangelism class called You Are What You Love, and it's kind of like you are what you eat. And what it talked about was the importance of liturgy and this repetition, that it you know, it's God working in us through this liturgy. We work the liturgy, but God also works in us through this liturgy and makes us become who we are, these Bible-loving people, these worship-loving people. And, you know, I've said before that I always, you know, before I came to Silverdale Lutheran, I thought the liturgy was just boring and wasn't really doing anything to me. But now that we don't have it, it really, you know, it shows how true that really is.
Mm. You never know what you got till it's gone, as they say, right? Yeah, no, that's helpful, Kim. Yeah. No, it does have an impact, even if we don't know it. Yeah, Bruce.
Well, I was just thinking something like this is kind of a wilderness experience for us, because we are put out of our sanctuary. And we're doing the best we can with the computers and the outdoor services, and they are very helpful, you know.
Yeah.
But we long to get back to our promised land, that being our sanctuary. You know what I mean? And so I can relate to the Israelites somewhat too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great comparison. Right on. This is a wilderness wandering. Or even exile, you know. I think of when they went off into exile. So yeah.
Yeah, it's more like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's both in the sense that so much of, you know, in the exile experience and the Numbers experience, you know, although in Numbers, I suppose they had their tabernacle with them all the time, in the wilderness wandering. But in the exile, they
services and stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, in the exile, that's true, Bruce. Yeah. They lost all of it, you know. So I think the wilderness is probably the better analogy. Yeah. All right.
The sense of Go ahead.
I really miss the communion together at the altar. You know, Gary and I do communion at home, you know, with worship or at the Park and Praise, but you know, they hand us those little things and they say this, you know, this is Christ's body, you know, given to you, and but it's just not the same. It just doesn't have that holiness that it has at church.
Agree.
I agree. I agree 100%. Yep. All right. Well, look at what we've pulled out of this chapter. God is good. All right.
I didn't get in here at the beginning of the service, but have you heard what I consider to be good news, that the United Arab Emirates has made a peace with Israel, and they're going to exchange embassies and trade, and it's sort of a big step toward a peace process in the Middle East.
I had not heard that, Bruce. Very interesting.
It was on the news, and it's a big deal. I mean, it's not just okay, you're okay, we're okay. They're going to change embassies, and they're going to be full relations.
Yeah. It's important to note that amongst the Middle East, Israel has very few of those connections. So that is a big step.
One more thing that I found was very interesting is Donald Trump was joking. He says, well, I was hoping to name it the Donald J. Trump Accord, but that didn't go over very good with the media. So we're calling it the Abraham Accord. And it refers back to those who bless Israel are blessed. And it sounds pretty neat. I hope it works out, the way it's supposed to.
Interesting. Oh boy. Wow. Interesting. It's the interesting thing about that is, oh boy, that it actually brings up a lot of stuff. I get frankly nervous when the folks who spoke for the creation of Israel before the United Nations back in whenever that was, right after World War II, I think, as I recall. They went right to the Bible and they said, see, God gave us this land. There's our deed, but that's from a religious perspective, of course, and so just to be clear, I'm completely for having a land for Jewish people to live. I think we don't ever want to see the Holocaust happen again. And yet I know that there were people living in Israel that were displaced to some degree or decided to be, all of that. This is where we get into all the political stuff. But yeah, Israel has been under attack since its creation. And so to have other Arab countries, say, you become formally, involved. Well, Egypt did that. And actually Jordan does too. Jordan has a pretty good relationship with Israel, at least they have in the past.
Well, it was framed at the conference that it was the three great religions all go back to Abraham as the father of their religions.
Yeah, and that part I think is helpful to say that we have a common.
It was framed in that way that those who bless Israel bless themselves, and I'm just going to take it on faith that maybe we are going to have a period of peace in the Middle East, and that would be good.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that completely, but my only nervousness is I think I see it more on secular terms. Like, I don't think modern Israel is biblical Israel. Okay.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah. So, but I know that's heresy to some Zionist Christians who feel like the modern creation of Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I see Israel as a secular nation that needs to exist. It's a very important ally. I see the Jewish people as God's people, like Paul says in Romans 9, but I don't necessarily see the actual nation of Israel in biblical terms. So that's where I start to get a little nervous on some of this, but that's getting into the weeds. I hope that this new accord will bring about a more peaceful situation for sure. Yeah.
But I think God always keeps his remnant there in Israel. I mean, the nation might be secular, but there are his honest believers there too.
Certainly. And I think there has been that all throughout history, even without the actual physical nation of Israel. And Paul says that very clearly, that, the call and the covenant of God are irrevocable. He says it very clearly in Romans. But again, that, does that involve, an actual nation? That's where people, I guess, agree to disagree. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's very interesting situation. I think it's what we need to be very clear about is we want to not let the Holocaust ever happen again. And if we didn't support Israel, it would happen pretty quick, because there's a lot of enemies that want to destroy those folks. All right. Great.
Well, what
Thank you,
was
Bruce.
mentioned, I hope I'm not getting into it too much, but what was mentioned in this is that it's hoped that someday the displaced people will have a land of their own too.
Yeah. And that's the Palestinian or the Arab
Yeah.
side.
I lose that word sometimes, but that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole political, stymied situation that, a two-state solution or a one-state solution, or, and then there's some people that feel like the whole that Palestinians are simply Jordanian Arabs who were living, and now they become but Palestinians would of course disagree with that. And anyway, and then there's the way the Palestinians are treated, which to me is really concerning. But of course, then on the other side, there's the resorting to terrorism that some Palestinian factions that have done, and which, really is bad and has created a whole lot of problems. And, so it's like you get into, but to me, it's a typical power struggle that we see happening in every country and in every land and all over the place. But this one has a lot of religious stuff put on it that makes it even more intense. So yeah. Anyway, I'm no expert on any of that. So, but let's hope for peace and a more just situation. Amen. Well, were any other thoughts on chapter 32? We got a lot of great stuff out of that one. Very cool. We're about 5 minutes. Why don't we close
Pastor
up?
Bill, I got knocked off and now I only see you. I came back in. I wonder if everybody else got knocked off too.
We can see you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, I mean, we can see you now. I mean, that you spoke up, you're there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see everybody. I just didn't have the gallery view. Sorry about that.
No problem. So how about if I'm going to say, just because sometimes prayer concerns are a little bit confidential, I'm going to stop the record here. Let's see. Recording stopped.